The wind cut through Robert Hayes like a knife made of ice. He pulled his hood tighter and stepped off the cargo plane onto the frozen ground. Greenland stretched out before him, nothing but white and gray for miles. This was exactly what he wanted. No people, no questions, no one asking him how he was doing or if he needed to talk. The job was simple. A mining company needed someone to check their old facility up north, make sure the building was still standing, drop off some equipment, take pictures, get paid. Robert had been doing jobs like this for 3 years now, always moving, always alone. It was better this way. He loaded his supplies onto the snowmobile and headed toward the coordinates. The facility sat on the edge of a massive ice shelf, a gray concrete box that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. The door hung open, ice crusted around the frame. Robert grabbed his flashlight and stepped inside. The main hall was dark and cold. His breath came out in white clouds. Storage rooms lined both sides, their doors hanging off broken hinges. This place had been stripped clean years ago. Robert moved deeper into the facility, checking each room, taking notes on his tablet. Nothing unusual, just another dead building in the middle of nowhere. Then he reached the main chamber. His flashlight beam swept across the room and stopped. Robert's heart jumped in his chest. The back wall was not a wall at all. It was ice, thick and crystalline, stretching up 30 feet to the ceiling. And inside the ice were shapes. Massive shapes. Dozens of them. Robert moved closer, his boots crunching on the frozen floor. His mind tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The shapes had bodies like giant snakes, but with 4 legs tucked against their sides. Wings folded tight against their backs. Scales that caught the light even through the ice, shimmering like oil on water. Their heads were sleek and sharp, with closed eyes and mouths full of teeth. Dragons. His brain supplied the word, even though it made no sense. Dragons were not real. They were stories, myths. But here they were, frozen in the ice, looking like they had been caught mid-flight and turned to stone. Robert should have left. He should have called the company, told them to send a team, maybe some scientists. Instead, he found himself walking up to the ice wall. His hand lifted without thinking and pressed against the surface. Heat pulsed through his palm. Robert jerked back, but the warmth lingered on his skin. He stared at his hand, then at the ice. Slowly, carefully, he reached out again. The moment his fingers touched the frozen surface, that heat returned, stronger this time. It spread up his arm and into his chest, not burning, just warm. Alive, they were not dead. These creatures, whatever they were not fossils or statues. They were sleeping, waiting. Robert stood there for a long time, his hand pressed against the ice, feeling that steady warmth. Something pulled at him deep in his chest, a feeling he had not experienced in 3 years. Purpose thought he set up camp in one of the side rooms that night. The heating system was broken, but his sleeping bag was rated for extreme cold. He should have been planning his exit, figuring out how to report this discovery. Instead, he kept walking back to the chamber, shining his light on the frozen shapes. The smallest one was about the size of a delivery van, pressed against the ice near the floor. Its scales were copper-colored, and it had a scar running along its neck. Robert crouched in front of it, studying the details. The way its claws curved, the pattern of its scales, the delicate membrane of its wings. Without thinking, he started talking. "Hey there, I am Robert. I guess you've been here a while, huh?" His voice echoed in the empty chamber. He felt stupid, talking to a frozen creature that probably could not hear him anyway. But the silence was worse. The silence let other sounds creep in. Sounds he spent 3 years trying to forget. Explosions. Screaming. Dave is calling his name while blood poured between Robert's fingers. He kept talking. "This place is pretty cold. I mean, you're probably used to it by now. Been here longer than I have." He laughed, but it came out hollow. "I used to work in the desert. Afghanistan. Hot as hell during the day, cold at night. Different kind of cold, though. Not like this." The copper dragon's eyes stayed closed. Its body remained perfectly still. But Robert kept talking anyway, filling the silence with words that did not matter, just to keep the other sound away. Over the next 2 days, he explored every inch of the facility. He found the old control room with dead computer screens and frozen pipes. He found supply closets with rusted tools. He found living quarters where miners had once slept. But he always came back to the chamber. He started making rounds. Every few hours, he would walk along the ice wall, checking each dragon like he used to check patients in the field hospital. He knew it was crazy. They were frozen solid. They had probably been frozen for years, maybe longer. But his hands remembered the motions. Check for breathing. Look for changes. Monitor. Record. Carried out on the third day, he noticed something different about the copper dragon. The ice around it looked thinner. He could see more details now. Individual scales. The texture of its claws. When he pressed his hand against the ice, the warmth was stronger than before. Robert made a decision then. He did not understand what these creatures were or why they were here. But they were alive, and he was a medic. For the first time since Davis died in his arms, Robert Hayes had patience again that he was going to wake them up. Robert found the facility's heating system on his fourth day there. It was old, probably older than he was, but the main components looked intact. He spent 6 hours in the basement, cleaning frozen pipes and replacing blown fuses with spares he found in a maintenance locker. When he finally got the system running, it coughed and wheezed like a sick animal, but warm air started flowing through the vents that he did not turn it up all the way. That would be stupid, maybe dangerous. The dragons had been frozen for who knew how long. Warming them too fast could kill them, the same way pulling a drowning person up too quickly could cause problems. Robert had seen enough trauma cases to know that slow and steady was always better. He moved his supplies into the main chamber. A cot, his medical kit, though he had no idea if human medicine would work on whatever these creatures were. Food and water. A portable stove. He set up near the copper dragon, the smallest one, because something told him it would wake first. The talking helped. He had not realized how much the silence was eating at him until he started filling it with words. At first, he just narrated what he was doing, checking the temperature, adjusting the heating vents, eating another tasteless meal. But gradually, the words got heavier. I was a combat medic, he said one night, sitting against the wall with a cup of instant coffee warming his hands. Pretty good one, too. Kept a lot of guys alive when they should have died. But you can't save everyone, you know? Statistics. That's what the counselor told me after. You saved 80%. That's an amazing success rate. But she didn't get it. I don't remember the 80%. I remember the others. The copper dragon remained still, but Robert kept going. There was this kid, Davis, 22 years old, talked about his girlfriend back home all the time, showed everyone pictures of her. They were going to get married when he got back. Robert's voice cracked. ID got his convoy. By the time we got there, he was already bleeding out. I did everything right. Applied pressure. Called for evac. Kept him talking. But there was too much damage. He died looking at me, asking me to tell his girl he loved her. Robert wiped his eyes. He had not talked about Davis in 3 years. Had not let himself. But here in this frozen room with creatures that could not judge him, could not tell him it was not his fault, the words just came out. I carried 23 names with me when I left Afghanistan. 23 people I couldn't save. And I know that's not logical. I know the counselors are right about statistics. But every time I close my eyes, I see their faces, hear their voices. He looked at the copper dragon. Maybe that's why I'm here. Maybe that's why I found you. Because you need saving, and I need to save someone. Does that make sense? No answer came, but Robert had not expected one. He finished his coffee and tried to sleep. The changes started on the 7th day. Robert woke to the sound of water dripping. He jumped up from his cot and ran to the ice wall. The surface was wet, small streams running down to pool on the floor. The ice around the copper dragon was definitely thinner now. He could see every detail of its body, the individual scales, the scars, the way its chest moved slightly, so slightly he almost missed that IT was breathing. Robert's hand shook as he grabbed his tablet and started taking notes. Respiration rate, temperature of the room, condition of the ice. He worked on autopilot, his medic training taking over. Monitor the patient. Record everything. Be ready for anything. On the 9th day, the ice cracked. The sound was sharp and sudden, like a gunshot. Robert dropped the wrench he was holding and spun around. A line had appeared in the ice. running from ceiling to floor right through the copper dragon's prison. Water gushed out, and then the whole section collapsed. Robert ran forward as the dragon fell. He managed to get under its head before it hit the concrete, taking the weight on his shoulder. The creature was heavy, so heavy he almost went down, but he braced his legs and held on. Heat radiated from its scales, almost burning his hands through his gloves. Carefully, slowly, he lowered the dragon's head to the floor. Its eyes were still closed, but its breathing was faster now. Panicked, Robert knew that feeling. Waking up in a strange place, not knowing where you were or what was happening. He had woken up like that plenty of times himself. "Hey, it's okay," Robert said, keeping his voice calm and steady. "You're safe. I've got you. Just breathe." The dragon's eyes opened. They were bronze-colored, bright and aware. They focused on Robert, and he felt something shift in his chest. Not words exactly, more like a feeling. Confusion, fear, pain. Robert kept his hands on the dragon's neck, feeling the rapid pulse under its scales. "I know you're scared. I know this is all strange. But you're okay now. I'm Robert. I'm a medic. I'm here to help." The dragon made a sound, low and rumbling. Its body trembled. Robert grabbed the thermal blankets from his supplies and wrapped them around the creature as best he could. The dragon leaned into the warmth, its breathing starting to slow. They stayed like that for hours. Robert talking softly, monitoring the dragon's vital signs as best he could. The creature watching him with those bronze eyes, not moving but not pulling away either. As the sun set outside and the chamber grew dark, Robert realized something. For the first time in 3 years, the sounds of explosions and screaming were gone from his head. All he could hear was the dragon's breathing, steady and strong, matching his own. He was not alone anymore. The copper dragon drank water from a bucket like it had been thirsty for 1,000 years. Robert held the container steady while the creature lapped at it with a dark gray tongue. When the bucket was empty, the dragon looked at him and made that rumbling sound again. Robert refilled it twice more before the dragon seemed satisfied. Food was harder. Robert had no idea what dragons ate. He tried offering some of his dried meat, but the dragon just sniffed it and turned away. It moved slowly around the chamber, its wings dragging on the floor, stopping to examine the other frozen dragons in the ice. Each time it paused at one, it would make a different sound. A whine, a click, something that sounded almost like a word. "They're your family," Robert said quietly. The dragon looked back at him, and Robert felt that strange sensation again. Not words in his head, but emotions. Sadness, worry, loss. "Yeah," Robert said. "I get it." The dragon limped back to where Robert had set up his camp and lay down near the portable heater. It was favoring its left rear leg. Robert knelt beside it, moving slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Can I check that leg? I think you're hurt." The dragon watched him, but did not move away. Robert carefully examined the leg, running his hands over the scales. There was swelling around the ankle joint, probably for being frozen in an awkward position for so long. Not broken, but definitely sprained. Robert went to his medical kit and pulled out an elastic bandage. It was meant for humans, way too small for a dragon's leg, but he had an idea. He grabbed the climbing rope from his supplies and fashioned a support wrap, padding it with strips of cloth. The dragon held perfectly still while he worked, those bronze eyes watching his every move. "There," Robert said, tying off the wrap. "That should help. Keep weight off it for a few days if you can." The dragon shifted its leg, testing the support. Then it did something that made Robert's breath catch. It pressed its head against his shoulder, gentle but firm, the same way a dog might. That rumbling sound again, but softer this time. Grateful, Robert's hand moved to the dragon's neck, feeling the warmth of its scales. "You're welcome," he whispered. That night, Robert woke to find the dragon pressed against his cot, radiating heat like a living furnace. He should have been afraid. This was a creature that could probably kill him with one bite. But instead, he felt safer than he had in years. He reached out and rested his hand on the dragon's side, feeling it breathe. The nightmares stayed away. Over the next week, the dragon grew stronger. It started eating the fish Robert caught through a hole in the ice outside. It explored every corner of the facility. And slowly, the other dragons began to thaw. The second one to wake was bigger, with dark green scales and amber eyes. It came out of the ice thrashing and panicking, wings flailing, tail whipping around. Robert pressed himself against the wall while the copper dragon rushed forward, making sharp, clicking sounds. The green dragon stopped, turned its head, and went still. The two dragons touched their heads together, and Robert felt waves of emotion rolling through the room. Relief, joy, questions. The third dragon was even larger, with blue-black scales. It woke more calmly, but its eyes were hard and suspicious. It looked at Robert like he was a threat. The copper dragon moved between them, making more of those clicking sounds. The blue dragon's tail lashed once, but it backed down. By the end of 2 weeks, 7 dragons had woken. Each one was different. One had red scales and was curious about everything, sniffing Robert's equipment and trying to figure out how his tablet worked. Another was small and nervous, staying close to the copper dragon at all times. The biggest one, with silver-gray scales, watched Robert constantly, but never approached. The copper dragon became a bridge between Robert and the others. When he brought food, it would eat first, showing the others it was safe. When he needed to check someone's injuries, it would go with him, making calming sounds. The dragons had their own language, their own hierarchy, and Robert was learning to read it. He also learned their story, though it came in pieces. Sometimes when the copper dragon touched him, images would flash through Robert's mind. A world with purple skies and 2 suns. Cities built into mountains. Smaller creatures, vulnerable and afraid, that the dragons protected. Then fire. Destruction. A choice between fighting and fleeing. They chose sleep, hoping to wake when the danger passed. You were protectors, Robert said one evening, sitting with the copper dragon while the others slept. You guarded people who needed you. And when you couldn't protect them anymore, you left. The dragon made a soft sound, and Robert felt the truth of it. These creatures had not just lost their home. They had lost their purpose. They were guardians with nothing left to guard. I know how that feels, Robert said quietly. I was a protector too. A medic. I kept people alive. That was my job, my whole identity. And then I couldn't save some of them, and I didn't know who I was anymore. The copper dragon pressed closer to him. But maybe we can figure out together, Robert continued. Maybe we're both supposed to be here. You need someone to care for, and I need someone to care about. That's not nothing, right? The dragon's bronze eyes caught the light from the heater. It made that rumbling sound, the one Robert had come to recognize as contentment, as agreement. Outside, the wind howled across the ice. Inside the facility, a broken medic and 7 recovering dragons kept each other warm. And for the first time since Afghanistan, Robert Hayes felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He just did not know how long it would last. The helicopters came on a Tuesday morning. Robert heard them before he saw them. The familiar thump of rotor blades cutting through the Arctic air. His whole body went rigid. That sound used to mean help was coming, evac was on its way, someone might live. Now it just meant his time was up. The copper dragon lifted its head from where it had been sleeping near the heater. The other dragons stirred, sensing danger. Robert stood and walked to the facility entrance, his hands shaking. 3 military helicopters circled the building like predators, then began their descent onto the ice shelf. Stay here, Robert said to the dragons, though he knew they could not understand his words. The copper dragon stood anyway, moving to his side. The others formed up behind them, a wall of scales and muscle. They were not hiding. They were protecting him. Robert stepped outside as the first helicopter touched down. Soldiers poured out, weapons raised, moving in formation. An officer stepped forward, a woman with sharp eyes and 3 stars on her collar. She looked at Robert, then passed him at the dragons visible through the open facility door, and her expression hardened. Mr. Hayes, she said, her voice cutting through the wind. Step away from the creatures. No, Robert said. The word came out steadier than he expected. That was not a request. We have orders to secure this site and contain any potential threats. You need to move. Now. Robert did not move. The copper dragon pressed against his back, and he felt its warmth through his coat. The other dragons shifted, wings spreading slightly, a clear warning. The soldiers tensed, fingers tightening on their weapons. They're not threats, Robert said. They're refugees. They're intelligent, and they're under my care. The officer's eyes narrowed. Your care? Mr. Hayes, you were hired to inspect a facility. Instead, you've been living with unknown creatures for 3 weeks. We have satellite footage of thermal signatures that shouldn't exist. We need answers, and we need you to cooperate. I'll cooperate, Robert said, but the dragons come with me. We're a package deal. One of the soldiers muttered something. Another raised his weapon higher. The copper dragon made a low growling sound, and the other dragons responded, a chorus of rumbles that Robert felt in his chest. The standoff stretched out, seconds feeling like hours. Then the copper dragon did something Robert had not expected. It stepped around him, moving slowly toward the officer. Its head lowered, not in aggression, but in a gesture Robert had seen it make before. Respect. Submission. The officer froze, but to her credit, she did not back away. The dragon stopped a few feet from her and made a soft clicking sound. It looked back at Robert, then at the officer, then pressed its head gently against the ground. It's showing you it's peaceful, Robert said quietly. That's what it did when I first woke it up. It's asking for trust. The officer stared at the dragon for a long moment. Then she looked at Robert, and he saw the calculations happening behind her eyes. Threat assessment, risk analysis, all the things they taught soldiers to do. Lower your weapons, she ordered. The soldiers hesitated, but obeyed. The officer crouched down, still keeping distance, and studied the copper dragon. You're saying these things are intelligent? More intelligent than you'd think, Robert said. They communicate with each other. They have social structures. They understand emotions. And they remember. They remember their world being destroyed. They remember losing everything. They chose to freeze themselves rather than die fighting. How do you know this? Robert hesitated. They show me. When the copper one touches me, I see images, feelings. It's not telepathy exactly, more like shared emotions. But it's real. They're real. And they're people, not animals. The officer stood up slowly. The copper dragon rose as well, backing toward Robert. The other dragons relaxed slightly, sensing the danger had passed, at least for now. This is beyond my authority, the officer said. I need to make some calls. But Mr. Hayes, you and these creatures are coming with us. You'll be taken to a secure facility for evaluation. All of you. Where? Robert demanded. That's classified. Then we're not going. The officer's jaw tightened. You don't have a choice. Yes, I do. Robert stood straighter, finding strength he thought he had lost years ago. I'm the only person these dragons trust. I'm the only one who can communicate with them. You try to separate us, they'll panic. They'll defend themselves. People will get hurt. Is that what you want? The officer studied him for a long moment. Then she pulled out a radio and walked away, speaking in low tones. Robert watched her, his heart hammering. The copper dragon pressed close, and he rested his hand on its neck. It's going to be okay, he whispered, not sure if he was reassuring the dragon or himself. When the officer came back, her expression was unreadable. You're right. Separating you from them would be a mistake. So here's what's going to happen. We're setting up a temporary facility 50 miles from here. You and the dragons will be transported there together. You'll be given quarters, supplies, whatever you need. But there will be guards, and there will be scientists, and you will cooperate with their evaluation. Understood. Robert wanted to argue, but he knew this was the best deal he was going to get. Understood. But I have conditions. The dragons are treated with respect. No weapons pointed at them unless absolutely necessary. And I'm present for any examinations or tests. All of them. The officer considered this. Agreed. But Mr. Hayes, you need to understand something. What happens next is bigger than you or me. These creatures are going to change everything. The world needs to know they exist. And people much more powerful than me are going to want answers. Then I'll give them answers, Robert said. But only if the dragons are safe. Fair enough. The officer extended her hand. Colonel Barnes. Looks like we'll be working together. Robert shook her hand. Just don't make me regret this. I could say the same to you, Barnes replied. She looked at the dragons, still standing in a protective formation. Think you can get them to follow us peacefully? Robert turned to the copper dragon. It looked at him with those bronze eyes, and he felt the question in that gaze. Trust. Yeah, Robert said softly. We could trust them. For now. The dragon made a clicking sound, and the others responded. Slowly, they moved toward the helicopters, following Robert's lead. As he walked across the ice, soldiers and dragons moving together in an uneasy peace, Robert realized his quiet isolation was over. Whatever came next, it would be anything but simple. But at least he would not be facing it alone. The new facility was not what Robert expected. Instead of cages and concrete cells, they built something that looked almost comfortable. A massive dome structure with heated floors, artificial sunlight, and enough space for the dragons to spread their wings. His quarters were attached to the main dome by a connecting tunnel, a small apartment with a bed, a desk, and a window that looked directly into the dragon habitat. The copper dragon refused to sleep anywhere except right outside Robert's door. The first week was chaos. Scientists arrived by the dozen, all wanting samples and scans and tests. Robert stayed with the dragons through all of it, explaining procedures, calming them when they got nervous. The copper dragon tolerated the examinations because Robert was there. The others followed its lead, though the big silver one still growled at anyone who got too close to Doctor. Lisa Park became Robert's main point of contact. She was a xenobiologist, though she admitted with a laugh that studying alien life had been theoretical until now. She was patient with the dragons and asked Robert's opinion before trying anything new. He appreciated that. Their biology is fascinating, she told Robert one afternoon while reviewing scan results. Their body temperature runs hot, around 120 degrees. Their scales are made of a carbon-silicon compound we've never seen before. And their brains are large and complex, with neural pathways that suggest high intelligence. I could have told you they were smart, Robert said. Yes, but now we have proof. Lisa smiled. Your observations have been invaluable. The way you describe their behaviors, their social structures. Most people would have just seen dangerous animals. You saw people. Robert shrugged. I was a medic. You learn to look past the surface. Everyone's got something human in them, even if they're not human. The copper dragon was going through an MRI scanner nearby, holding perfectly still like Robert had asked. When the scan finished, it immediately came to Robert, pressing its head against his chest. He scratched behind the ridges above its eyes, a spot he had learned the dragon liked. You two have a remarkable bond, Lisa observed. It trusts you completely. The feeling's mutual, Robert said quietly. But not everyone was as understanding as Lisa. Military advisors wanted to know if the dragons could be weaponized. Defense contractors sent representatives asking about their capabilities. Politicians argued about whether they should even be allowed to exist or if they were too dangerous to keep alive. Robert attended every meeting, every hearing, every briefing. He spoke until his voice was hoarse, defending the dragons, explaining what they had lost, fighting for their right to live in peace. Colonel Barnes backed him up more often than not, which helped. She had seen the dragons' intelligence firsthand and was not comfortable treating them as weapons. The hardest part was the nightmares. Not his own, surprisingly. Those had gotten better since the dragons woke up. But the dragons had nightmares too. Robert would wake in the middle of the night to hear them crying out, sounds of distress that cut through the walls. He would pull on his clothes and run to the dome, finding them huddled together, shaking. The first time it happened, he did not know what to do. Then the copper dragon looked at him with those bronze eyes, and Robert felt the terror pouring off it. Memories of their world burning, of people they could not save, of running away while everything they loved died. Robert sat down on the floor and started talking. He told them about Afghanistan, about the friends he had lost, about Davis and the others whose names he carried. He told them about the guilt, the feeling that he should have done more, been faster, been better. He told them about the nights when he woke up screaming, the days when he could barely function, the 3 years he spent running from his own memories. But it gets better, he said softly. The dragons pressed close around him. It never goes away completely, but it gets easier to carry. And you don't have to carry it alone. That's what I'm learning. You're helping me. and I'm helping you. We're healing each other." The copper dragon made that rumbling sound, and the others gradually calmed down. They stayed like that until morning, Robert surrounded by dragons, all of them keeping each other's nightmares at bay. After 2 months, the International Council on Xenobiological Rights called a hearing. Representatives from 20 nations gathered to decide the dragon's fate. Robert was terrified. He had faced combat, had held men together while they were dying, but this felt bigger. This was 7 lives depending entirely on his words. The night before the hearing, he could not sleep. He sat in the dome with the dragons, trying to figure out what to say. How do you explain the value of a life to people who only see data and threats? The copper dragon nudged his hand. Robert looked at it, and suddenly he felt something different from the usual emotions. This time there were images, clear and specific. The copper dragon showing him a memory of its world, of small creatures it had protected. One in particular, something that looked almost like a child, with big eyes and soft fur. The dragon had saved it from a predator, had stayed with it until it was safe. Then the image shifted. Now Robert saw himself through the dragon's eyes. Saw himself wrapping the dragon's leg when it was hurt. Saw himself bringing food and water. Saw himself sitting with the dragon through its nightmares, offering comfort even though he was just as damaged. The dragon was showing him that he was doing the same thing it used to do. Protecting, caring, healing. That Robert's eyes burned with tears. "You're telling me I'm like you." That were the same. The copper dragon pressed its forehead against his, and Robert felt the answer clearly. Yes, protector, guardian, both lost, both found again. "Thank you," Robert whispered. The next morning, he walked into that hearing room with 7 dragons behind him and the copper dragon at his side. He was not alone. He had never been less alone in his entire life. And whatever happened next, they would face it together. Protectors who had found something worth protecting again. Each other. The hearing room in Geneva was bigger than Robert expected. Curved rows of seats rose up like a theater filled with delegates from countries he could barely name. Cameras lined the walls. Screens showed his face to thousands of people watching around the world. His hands wanted to shake, but the copper dragon pressed against his leg under the table, warm and solid, and he stayed steady. For 3 hours, he listened to people debate the dragons like they were objects. The military representative from China argued they were too powerful to exist outside government control. A scientist from Germany wanted them studied in isolation. A politician from Russia suggested they were a threat that needed to be neutralized. Each speaker had charts and data and threat assessments, reducing 7 living, feeling beings to numbers and percentages. Robert waited his turn, jaw clenched, fighting to keep calm. Finally, the chairman called his name. He stood up. The copper dragon stood with him, and the other 6 dragons rose from where they had been resting at the back of the room. Every camera swung toward them. "My name is Robert Hayes," he began, his voice carrying through the sudden silence. "I'm a former combat medic. I serve in Afghanistan for 2 tours. I've held more dying men than I can count. I know what it looks like when someone is beyond saving, and I know what it feels like to fail." He paused, making eye contact with as many delegates as he could. 3 years ago, I left the military and spent my time running. From my memories, from my guilt, from the 23 names I carry with me, people I couldn't save. I took isolated jobs because being around people hurt too much. Everyone wanted to tell me it wasn't my fault, that I did my best, that I should move on. But you can't move on from watching someone die in your arms. You just learn to live with it. The room was completely quiet now. Even the delegates who had been checking their phones were paying attention. Then I found the dragons, frozen in ice, waiting, and I did what I was trained to do. I assessed their condition. I provided care. I monitored their recovery. Not because anyone ordered me to, not because I thought they could be useful, but because they were alive and needed help, and helping people is what I do. Robert reached down and rested his hand on the copper dragon's neck. These creatures came from another world. They were protectors there, guardians of beings who needed them. When their world was destroyed, they could have fought. They could have died with honor. Instead, they chose to sleep, to wait, hoping for a chance to survive. That takes courage. That takes hope. Those aren't animal instincts. Those are choices made by people. A delegate from France raised his hand. The chairman nodded, and she stood. Mr. Hayes, you claim these creatures are people, but they cannot speak. They cannot participate in society. How can we grant rights to beings that cannot advocate for themselves? They do advocate, Robert said firmly, just not with words. The copper dragon here has shown me memories of its world, images that are clearer than any photograph. It has communicated fear, joy, grief, love. It understands when I'm having a panic attack and stays close until I can breathe again. The others have distinct personalities. One is curious and playful. Another is protective and serious. One is anxious and needs reassurance. Those are not programming. Those are individuals. He took a breath, organizing his thoughts. But you want to know the real reason you should recognize them as people? Because we need them, not as weapons or tools. We need them because they remind us what we're supposed to be. These dragons lost everything, and instead of becoming bitter or violent, they're trying to heal. They're trying to find purpose again. They're trying to protect, even though they have nothing left to protect except each other and one broken medic. Robert's voice cracked, but he pushed through. I see these dragons struggling with trauma just like I struggle with mine. I see them wake up from nightmares. I see them comfort each other. And I see them trying every single day to be okay again. They're not threats. They're survivors. And if we can't extend compassion to survivors, if we can't recognize the value in beings who choose hope over destruction, then what does that say about us? The copper dragon made a soft sound and pressed closer. Robert felt the warmth spreading through his chest, not just physical heat, but something deeper. Support. Solidarity. For 3 years, I thought I was useless because I couldn't save everyone. But the dragons taught me something. Being a protector isn't about saving everyone. It's about showing up. It's about caring. It's about being present for the ones who need you. The dragons do that for me. I do that for them. That's what protection actually means. He looked around the room, meeting skeptical eyes and sympathetic ones. So here's what I'm asking. Recognize them as sentient beings with rights. Give them a place to live in peace. Let me be their advocate and their voice until they can find a way to speak for themselves. And trust that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the universe is not the creature with teeth and claws, but the person who refuses to see another's humanity. Robert sat down. The copper dragon settled beside him, its bronze eyes watching the delegates. The room erupted in whispered conversations. The chairman called for a recess. Colonel Barnes found Robert in the hallway afterward. That was quite a speech. Did it work? Robert asked. We'll know soon. She studied him. You meant all that. About the dragons healing you. Every word, Robert said. I sleep now. Actually sleep. No pills, no alcohol. The nightmares still come, but they don't control me anymore. The dragons need me, and that gives me a reason to get up every day. That's more than I've had in years. The vote came back 2 hours later. 18 nations in favor, 2 against. The dragons would be recognized as sentient beings. They would be given rights, protection, and sanctuary. And Robert Hayes would be their official liaison. When Robert walked back into the dome that evening, the dragons surrounded him. Not just the copper one, but all 7. They pressed close, and he felt their emotions washing over him. Relief, gratitude, hope. We did it, Robert whispered. You're safe now. The copper dragon touched its head to his, and Robert saw an image. Not a memory this time, but something new. A future. Dragons flying over open land, with Robert standing below, watching them soar. Free, but not alone. Protected, but not imprisoned. Together, Robert smiled, tears running down his face. For the first time since Davis died, he was not carrying 23 names as a burden. He was carrying 7 dragons as a purpose. And that made all the difference. He had set out to save them, but they had saved him right back. 2 groups of damaged protectors, finding each other in the cold and learning to heal together. It was not the ending either of them expected. That IT was better.